Hello, welcome to the program Spiritism Inspiring Lives. Today's theme is our subject, and this theme is representing the reflections of the Spirit Emmanuel in the book in Portuguese, Ação e Caminho, under the message as he presents to us, which is Nosso Assunto, in Portuguese, yeah? So we start by saying that we are all immortal beings, spirits in evolution, essentially beings of goodness, essentially beings of love, who are on the pathway of evolution. So when we start to reflect about the teachings of the Spirit Benefactor, Emmanuel, it aims for us to focus on the subject of our own evolution, of our own progress, of our own growing process in the pathway towards the enlightenment, towards the divine love that we all bring within. For us to start then, I invite you all to start, and also those who may be joining us, they can also participate in the chats, but also to expand our own self-awareness according to the information, the invitation that we receive through each reflection by the enlightened beings who are here to help us. Spiritism Inspiring Lives is a program that each reflection, each thought that we bring from the enlightened beings, helping us to nourish our souls, helping us to fortify ourselves as we are moving towards to improving ourselves, to grow, and also to promote ourselves. So we start with the Spirit Emmanuel, and I quote, as I mentioned previously, the reference is in the book Ação e Caminho, under the message Nosso Assunto, or subject. He starts, I quote, "Do not suffer because other brings you disappointments and misunderstanding. Quite often we may suffer because of other people's imperfections. Sometimes we suffer even because of our own imperfections. But here we are reminded or invited to reflect about. Not suffer means that, again, our subject means the invitation to evolve, to progress, to become more self-aware, understanding that we are all living in the school planet Earth, which still is a planet of trials and expiations, and that is merely because our own shortcomings, our own states of minds, as beings reincarnated as we all are. So when he said, don't suffer, because there's a lot of suffering going on earth, it is helping us to look beyond the physicality, beyond our own biology, beyond our own references that we, old souls, through a new body, may bring in our unconscious minds the old ways of being, so that we can actualize ourselves, actually, because there are no perfect beings on earth. We are all imperfect, perfecting ourselves. The only perfect being who was on earth was Jesus, while he was quite some time ago. But we are all learning with ourselves, with others, through the natural laws of evolution, which are God's laws. In other words, through the natural laws of progress, which are under the universal code of love that we still are learning what that means to us. It's very important to learn to flexibilize ourselves and understand that we also still do mistakes, quite a lot, much more than perhaps we may have knowledge. And mistakes is not a mistake, if I may say so. Mistakes are part of us as learners to try to learn, and through that learning we still can do mistakes, and we are allowed to do them as long as we don't feel pleasure in doing them and repeating them. Neither, once we do mistakes, that we go into the reactive position, which we conditioned ourselves for centuries, but merely in a humble way, in an honest way, we learn and move on, and that is the invitation. And then we move on with Emmanuel when he says, those who perhaps pursue us are still like ourselves. They get it right or not, as he says. Again, it's important in our self-awareness process also to increase awareness that sometimes people may do mistakes, not consciously. Sometimes they may be aware and they do it on purpose. Doesn't matter. Whatever is outside us, that is secondary. Through the law of God, through the laws of God, through the natural universal code of evolution that we bring within ourselves, we can learn how to protect ourselves from ourselves in relation to whatever is external. So we do mistakes, we get things right. Others do mistakes, they also get things right. The main point is that we don't get stuck in our own wrongdoings, in our own shortcomings, in our own imperfections, because we all are destined to conquer our real happiness, all destined to evolve further beyond our egoistic state of mind, beyond our own shortcomings and limitations that perhaps we still are dealing with today. As learners, we always give ourselves new possibilities, new chances. And the universe is always on a daily basis here to protect us, to help us, and to invite us through the experiences that we attract according to the inner needs that we have, that we attract in order to promote ourselves further. Hello, Antonia, welcome. Good to have you here as well. And then Emmanuel carries on here telling us, we feel happy when we are understood and forgiving. Well, that is the easiest way, isn't it, for us to be amongst each other? But sometimes that is not possible. It's not possible yet. It will be possible in the future, either in this existence or in other existences. But also at the same time, as our theme today is our subject, nosso assunto, as Emmanuel started presenting the first slides, he is also too important to understand what is mine or our definition of happiness. What did we learn as unique beings in the universe, as we all are, happiness means to us? Because we are here to conquering real happiness. So when we are not supported according to what we think, that we can support ourselves beyond how we supported ourselves so far. Because once we are developing the ethical values in our own consciousness, we are always having the feeling of joy or happiness within ourselves, because we are departing, or we are nourishing ourselves from the essence of ourselves. So we are never getting things wrong in that way, even if it's not perceived on the outside. And then we carry on with Emmanuel when he says, let us learn to understand and tolerate each other. Or subject, as Emmanuel said. We, as I started our reflections, we still are all in the process of learning to understand first ourselves. Quite often we understand very little about ourselves because we have been in a long, long journey of ignorance or of rebelliousness, that we did not want to look within ourselves. We have not welcomed the invitations of the universe for us to heal ourselves. And here we are now. But it's important to learn to understand us, therefore we will understand others. We can only understand others to the extent that we understand ourselves according under the universal code of love. And also tolerate each other. How can we learn to tolerate each other? When we start the process of learning to tolerate our own shortcomings, our own learning process that we are under, all of us, myself and all of us who are here, either incarnates and all of those in the spiritual world, because this is the natural law of our progress as immortal beings as we are. Tolerate our own shadows, tolerate our own weaknesses. Tolerate does not mean to validate them, but it's just increasing our understanding, that we increase in that way of being more tolerant with ourselves and others, more understanding of ourselves and others. We actually are expanding self-love. We are calming our own souls. We are becoming more light-hearted once we choose to take into that this approach, these references, these drops of wisdom that are presented to all of us. And then Imam carries on, and I quote, If we wait for others to help us solve our problems, it is natural that others also wait for us. Bear in mind that our subject, our theme today is our subject, really considering drops of wisdom, as we mentioned, coming from the superior beings, helping us to nourish our souls so that we also can not only expect that others are solving our problems, because in the end of the day, deep down, no one can do that. We can cooperate in the way that we talk, that we relate, that we study, that through our own way of being, we can cooperate a lot, and we learn always with others as well. Hopefully, we learn from those who really know more than we do, but we learn even with those who do mistakes. This already is some kind of inner wisdom once we don't react in relation to the shortcomings of others. And then we are here in this subject referring to learning to cooperate towards the good of ourselves to start with, and towards the good of everybody else, wherever we are based temporarily through a new physical body, and where we are, either in our family settings, in our work settings, in our community settings. Doesn't matter where we are, because the laws that guides us, that promotes us, they are everywhere. We just need to become more aware that we are already navigating within those laws, and we all are offered possibilities to constantly promote ourselves, to constantly evolve further. And then Emmanuel carries on by saying, I quote, "Good should be done charitable." Sorry, this is not Emmanuel. I moved now to the Spirits book in question 897. And there we learn the following, I quote, "Good should be done charitably, that is, without self-interest." Our subject, the theme today, which Emmanuel is presenting according to our actions in the pathway of self-enlightenment, where charity means love, and love is something from the essence level onwards, from the divine within us. We are promoting charitable ways of being as we undo our own illusions, our own shortcomings, our own negative, limited, distorted, irrational belief systems, as more as we learn and study, for example, as Spiritism, that helps us to enlighten our own rationality. And that way we are actualizing our thoughts, our belief systems, and also observing our personal interest, which is a self-interest, which usually is based on selfishness and pride, or vanity, rebelliousness, and these shadows that perhaps the roots still are within us. We can always do something more in order to promote us further, towards self-love, towards goodness, towards self-enlightenment, which is, on the end of the day, the main aim to be reincarnated on earth. And then we carry on still in the Spirits book, now in the part of the conclusion, the third part. And I quote what we can reflect here today in order to self-empower us more from the divine within. We learn that, I quote, "Fraternity presupposes selflessness, renunciation of the personality. Where there is true fraternity, pride is an anomaly." That is still is some kind of challenging for us here as we grow gradually and choose freely to diminish our own pride. But that will be the reality for all of us in the future once we can override our own egoistic, egocentric state of mind in terms of beliefs, in terms of emotions, in terms of tendencies that we still may bring on our perispirit. As we choose now the proposal of self-enlightenment, we can even study the Spiritist scale in the Spirits book, that we can learn the characteristics of the different degrees of evolution. And here when he says, where there is true fraternity, pride is an anomaly. And as I mentioned, this will be our reality in the future, because we are all destined to improve, we are all destined to grow, and therefore sooner or later we will end up being in superior worlds where fraternity is the reality, no longer pride. Now we are invited on daily basis to observe our own levels of pride, which is an anomaly when we consider the spirit essentially being a being of love, a being of peace, a being of fraternity, a being of goodness. Then pride is an anomaly temporarily as we learn to cleanse our psychic with these inferior shadows that we bring within us. We all on earth still are dealing with our pride and selfishness. He's still carrying on here in helping us with the drops of wisdom to nourish our souls, our hearts, our minds, so that we can cooperate more towards our own evolution, towards our own self-enlightenment process. Then we reflect in the Spirit's Book conclusion, part 5. And I quote, "Do not worry about opposition. Everything that is done against you will turn it in your favor. And your greatest adversaries unwillingly will serve your cause. Against the will of God, the ill of man cannot prevail." When I reflect on this passage in the Spirit's Book, I find it quite nourishing on the soul level onwards. I find it quite consoling, because Spiritism is a consolation for all of us. I find it quite hopeful, because Spiritism is hope in our existences as we transit throughout the different experiences. But they say, do not worry. It would be foolish for us to expect that we would not sooner or later, in one way or another, be facing opposition. And hopefully we are awakening more and more that we will not be the opposition to anybody else, but we will be more and more consciously cooperating for the good of all. But it's interesting here for us, because sometimes we may be quite reactive, or sometimes we may be thinking that is unfair what other people are doing. But listen, what we learn here, those who may oppose against us, if we are aware, if we are vigilant, if we understand the method of evolution in the universe, then we will recover within, we will heal our own illnesses, or our own ills, our own shortcomings. And in that way, we take advantage of the shortcomings of others to promote us even further in our self-illumination process. That having said that, does not mean that we go against anyone. No. As more as we are attentive in our own inner higher resources, we will not oppose anymore, because opposing means resisting our own evolution process. And against the will of God, the ill of man cannot prevail. That is quite consoling, friends, because the will of God is love. God created us with love in order for all of us to learn to love each other. And according to that law, which is a universal law, no ill of any one of us can prevail forever. Although we may disturb ourselves or disturb others, but that is temporary. As more as we understand the law of cause and effect, that everything that we do brings consequences. So when we do a mistake, we do take the responsibility, because we learn humbleness. Humbleness is the inner strength that we don't need to fight with ourselves, neither with others. We only have the need to learn with ourselves, with others. That is the way forward. And then as we come to the end of our reflections today, still in the Spirit's Book, the question 909, and I quote, "Could humans always overcome their evil tendencies through their own efforts?" That is a question that, at least myself, I always reflect on it. And it's very important when we consider our own evolution, our own transcendence, our own understanding, to grasp the ownership of our own self-enlightenment process. And then we receive the drops of enlightenment by the superior spirits when they say, I quote, "Yes, and offer with very little effort. What they lack is willpower. Oh, how few amongst you make efforts." This question is not criticizing our limitations or laziness or procrastination or projection or whatever it is. The enlightened beings are helping us to understand the power that each one of us brings within to actualize ourselves, to boost our willpower towards the divine within ourselves. Because surely, as we understand, we have been already in this learning process for centuries and centuries, we would easily understand that we used our free will or the willpower, but in the wrong direction. We use it quite often against us, although we were ignorant and sometimes through our own negative way of addressing life. Now we are in a position that we already can, if we choose so, to open our minds and perceive that we can invest in our own healing process internally. And the efforts is something that when we choose really to connect with the self within, the essence of ourselves, the resources of the higher self, the divine self that we bring within, and we choose then to forgive, we choose to be tolerant, we choose to do good, we choose to look after ourselves in a responsible way. We put efforts into to change our belief systems when they are against God's law, when they are against the universal code of evolution. We choose to do that because this educational process happens in every second in our existences, but we do it not because someone told us to do. We are all invited to use our own free will as we bring the natural law within ourselves, that we are stimulating from within the powers of our essence, which, although I mentioned some, tolerance, humbleness, forgiveness, responsibility, and so on and so forth, all of those practices are the training, the exercises of self-love. Therefore, it is important to consider here, we are old souls with new bodies. Old souls with new bodies who read this question, oh, how few amongst you make efforts. That phrase is something to stop, to meditate about, to reflect about ourselves, never to blame ourselves, but to stimulate our inner power towards the self-realization, towards conquering the real happiness within ourselves as the natural code of ethics, of wisdom already is teaching us. And as more as we meditate around, as more as we choose to reflect, we can even hear that within ourselves, where we bring the essence of those germs of wisdom, of love, of taking care of ourselves. And in that way, we are coming to the end of our reflections today. I wish you much peace, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.